There you go.
Well, this past week was unfortunately another that made it abundantly clear that there are things far more important than the sport we all love. Jacob Blake became just the latest black victim of police brutality in the United States when he was shot 7 times in the back by officers in Kenosha, Wisconsin, while trying to get into his car. Just days later, as protests broke out throughout the city, a white teenager was allowed to walk freely through the protests with a gun in hand after allegedly killing 2 people, further demonstrating the racial disparity that continues to exist on our continent. In response, the sports world took a stand, starting with the Milwaukee Bucks of the NBA, moving to the WNBA, MLS, MLB, and eventually the NHL. Athletes went on strike, forcing the postponement and cancellation of games. It was a sobering reminder of just how far we still have to go to end racial injustice in North America. Today on Waking the Red Weekly, presented by Footy Talks, we'll be joined by Mike Newell and Dr. Tej Sahota from the Toronto FC BIPOC Fan Coalition to discuss how their newly formed group is looking to create change both inside and outside BMO Field. My name is Mitchell Tierney, and I'm joined as always by Jeffrey P. Nesker and Michael Singh. How are you guys doing this week?
Good. It's an important conversation we're about to have. So.
Yeah, great, Mitch. Thanks for having us. And just off the top, really well said. Obviously, it's a very sensitive topic, and we're going to sort of tread lightly here, but it is important that we do use our platform to spread this message and raise awareness, because we are all battling the fight that is against, social injustice.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. As I said, Mike Newell and Dr. Tej will be joining us in just a moment here. But as I said, I think it was good to see MLS, at least the MLS players, stand up in the way they did. And, I wanted to give a particular shout out to Mark Anthony Kay, knowing he's Canadian. I think the way he's taken a leadership role in all of this has been, really good to see. And he's been very outspoken. So, again, shout out to him and everything he's had to say on these issues.
Absolutely. I've been impressed with how outspoken he's been, because he's obviously got the bullseye of being Canadian, and it hasn't affected his perspective in any way, shape, and form. And I applaud that.
He's just another Canadian that's, becoming a leader in world soccer. And, he's a little bit, I guess we can sway a little bit on the pitch. He's becoming a leader on the pitch, and it's great to see that he's becoming a leader off the pitch. How old is he? I think he's only 24 years old or something like that. And that's just extremely impressive. It's great to see, and keep going, man. Keep going.
Yeah. I mean, when he was talking about his experiences with TFC and owned up to the fact that maybe he wasn't ready to be a first team player before they let him go, I knew this was a special person that had a really, 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 really smart, really good head on his shoulders, and the level of accountability I found quite inspiring. So it's no surprise for me to see him jump to the challenge of social issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're now joined by Mike Newell and Dr. Tej Sahota from the BIPOC Fan Coalition, Toronto FC BIPOC Fan Coalition. Guys, really appreciate you taking the time to join the show this week.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I wanted to just start by, asking how this coalition was formed and the reasoning behind its formation.
So I think, forming the coalition was sort of a two-part process. One was this idea around, what is representation like at the club for BIPOC fans. I sort of made a call out to people who would be interested in this, because in my experience, helping to run a supporter group in the South End and having a little taste of sort of connecting with the club from a head office perspective, and then also dealing with leadership of other supporter groups and other fans. I just found that there wasn't a huge voice in terms of BIPOC people. A lot of the time I sat around the table and I might be one of two people that were people of color around the table. And I just sort of initially thought, like, what can we do to bring people of color, Black people, Indigenous people together to talk about the club that they love, and also talk about their experiences in BMO Field, and if there are ways that we can improve that and bring better representation to the club. So that was really the genesis of forming this, and this has come together pretty quickly. So we're still very much in the infant stages in terms of organizing and putting together who and what we are. But obviously, Teja's been a big part of this, helping us put this together. And, I think that, as we get on our feet in terms of organization, I think you'll hear more in terms of initiatives and things that we're doing to help improve the experience at BMO Field. It's not to take away anybody's fun. It's not to say that, you can't have fun at BMO Field. This is about, representing the idea that Toronto is this diverse place, but sometimes you don't feel like you see it in terms of its representation. So how do we best do that, and how do we do that in an authentic way?
Mm-hmm. And Mike, for our readers, and honestly for myself too, how does something like this sort of operate? I'm a big fan in sort of what you guys are doing, but just so for people who would want to get involved, how does something like this operate, and what are sort of their expectations, I guess?
Yeah, great question. So, really what we're trying to be is kind of a bridge between our fans, our allies, to the Toronto FC head office. And what we're trying to do is shed light kind of an unseen types of racism or microaggressions that are in the stadium. Not only just to bring that to the club's attention, but also talk to fans about experiences that BIPOC people in the stadium feel that, and that they may not understand, or simply because they don't have to deal with racism. It's not something that is prevalent in their lives. Just because it isn't doesn't mean it doesn't exist at BMO Field, or just because you haven't seen an incident doesn't mean that these things don't happen. And it's about trying to shed some light on that, and obviously, as we're going along and as we're having our meetings, we're realizing that there's a lot of different things that are in people's mind that they just haven't been able to talk about before, because there hasn't been a platform for that yet, right? Whether it's diversity, inclusion, bringing voices of Black, Indigenous, people of color, regardless of their race and gender. And I want to take a quick second to recognize the fact that, you guys were talking about, Mitchell, in your opening statement there, you were talking about, the NBA and different leagues sort of taking a initial stand on this. I think that we have to recognize that women have played, and especially Black women have played a huge role in getting this message out. So, that's something that we're focusing on as well. And then in regards to how we're connecting and being that bridge for fans, it's a safe space to talk about these things, and a safe space to suggest and bring change to BMO Field, and by extension, bringing that change to BMO Field also means bringing change to our communities as well outside of BMO Field. So as we grow, as we get a solid grounding of who we are and who we're going to impact, there's already talk about how do we impact, priority neighborhoods or neighborhoods that we feel have been underserved or represented by the club. And I've just had a discussion with somebody from head office just this morning about this. So, I think there's moves, there's baby steps that we're taking to get to that place. And I think there's a recognition that a coalition like ours can be a voice at the table.
Now, Mike, I know it's early days, and I appreciate that the goals right now seem to be pretty specific to TFC and the BMO Field experience. But I wonder, have you seen inclination of this occurring around the league? Have you been reached out to by other alike groups, maybe at other teams in other markets around the MLS?
Yeah, great question. So, and this question came up to me just recently. So we have had initial reach outs for some groups. They're mainly supporter groups. And just to be clear, the BIPOC Coalition is not a supporter group. We're not necessarily in the South End or anything like that. This is about fans from all over the stadium, and even those who cannot afford to have season tickets or come to games every single time. It doesn't mean you're less of a fan. But we've had some reach outs from some of those groups. As far as I've seen, and I could be wrong, again, I can't see everywhere. There isn't a direct coalition like we're trying to build at the current moment at other clubs. If there are, I'm happy to reach out and talk to them and see what's worked for them, what hasn't. Work on collaboration, collaboration. I think that's important. But we've been reached out by supporter groups from, Madison, Wisconsin, like Forward Madison, from Richmond Kickers, supporter groups, from Chicago, from Utah as well. So there's been some really great reach outs and a lot of encouraging words. It's now, all right, we've had those encouraging words. Where's the action next, right? And I think that's sort of the next step we'll need to take.
Okay, so speaking about next steps, and again, I know it's early days, but what are the goals, the first goals that you'd like to see, the first real steps of change that you would like to push through?
Yeah, and I think, I'll throw some of this to Tej as well. For me, one of the big ones, and I know this has been brought up in our meetings, is trying to make BMO a safe space for all people, right? And whether that's looking at the FAD code of conduct, whether that is looking at more policies around the stadium and around the match day experience that are viewed through an anti-racist, anti-sexist lens. And, that those are probably the most immediate goals. Right now, I think there is a longer term view of how do we get into communities, right? I think that's sort of a long-term play, and that takes time because, there's a lot of people you need to reach out to and get their expertise on this, right? We're not claiming to be experts in every field, but I think there's a lot of learning that we need to do in order to build those long-term goals out. But for the short term right now, we're looking at how do we, improve the match day experience at BMO? How do we make sure that fans that come in know that they're all welcomed and have a truly representative experience at the club?
Perfect. Wonderful.
Yeah, no, right on. Tej, what's going on? I see you over there. Don't worry. Tej, you had a really great article for our site yesterday. It received some great traction on social media. And for those who haven't been able to read it as yet, and I highly recommend you do read it if you haven't had the opportunity, check it out. It's on our website. But for those who haven't yet, can you just echo those sort of thoughts that you had about Michael Bradley deciding to stand for the national anthem?
Yeah, and thanks for the kind words, Michael. I really appreciate it, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you for affording me the platform to speak something like that, as opposed to just some disjointed tweets.
Of course.
Before, and I think that was important to get out there. But the crux of the argument is just simply I worry that people were conflating standing for the anthem or kneeling for the anthem as being an equivocal decision to support Black Lives Matter or not. And I'm not here to get into a deeper argument about to what extent each athlete needs to get involved or what our expectations are of them, but just to simply destroy that conflation of that argument is to say that someone can be kneeling for the anthem and not be doing anything else. Meanwhile, someone could be standing for the anthem and yet be accomplishing a lot more and be an ally. And that's what I want people to understand, is that being an ally of Black lives, of Indigenous and people of color, means a lot. Sorry for that. There's a steamship going off in the back. That being an ally means a lot more than just the actions that you take for 45 seconds for a song. And that, as Colin Kaepernick had once, it was never about the anthem. And so that argument can go both ways. If you're going to criticize Colin Kaepernick for kneeling and him saying, look, it's not about the anthem, then likewise, that argument exists conversely, is that if you're going to stand for the anthem, it's not about the anthem. We would rather that players be taking positive steps and using their platform for positive engagement and for betterment. And and I want people to ask this anthem issue. It's not about that. It never was about that. It's not about disrespecting the flags or the troops. It is simply about oppression and brutality against a group of people. And full stop there.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really well said. And I think Michael Bradley said this after. It's just that the anthem and that whole message just sort of got lost. It's not about the anthem itself, as you said. It's about what you do afterwards, and you summed that up perfectly. So thank you for saying that. I'll pass it on to Mitch for the next question, or Jeff.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to mention, Tej, that came up with a wonderful word, slactivism, and it's so easy for this to become slactivism. You know, you put in your 45 seconds for the cameras, and then you've done your due diligence for the day. The question must be asked: why are we still forcing the issue with national anthems in North American sports? I mean, it seems like that day is done. And I just wanted to know your feelings on the issue of the national anthems.
I mean, I can take a stab at it first, and then let Mike go afterwards, because it does become a little bit of sometimes a personal matter for people. And I think a national anthem game between Toronto FC versus Nashville, where's the patriotism in that? And it really does get to this like agnostic kind of BS and this military flyover stuff that starts kind of harboring feelings of unwelcomeness sometimes. And so I think that the national anthem in and it by itself, I'd be understanding, and I would have no issue of it being played. But I understand that for far too many people that there is, the related stuff that's become associated with it, the symbolism that's become associated with it, all the kind of the pro-military stuff that's been associated with it, where it's taken a life of its own. So if are feeling that is something that needs to be removed from games, I would totally be with it. I was once very, more opinionated on the subject, since kind of softened a little bit, just because it's almost, to me, and Jeff and Mike and Mitch, I really kind of keep reiterating this. It's not about the anthem. So standing, kneeling, giving players the time to do this, and then spending 45 minutes on Talking Heads radio and listening to Skip Bayless pontificate about what should have been done or what shouldn't have been done misses the whole point. So if this anthem has become an argumentative point, then remove it. But to me, it's never about them. It's about what do these players do with their platform? What is happening? What are clubs doing? What are people in position of power actually undertaking? And far too much, the argument is very easily diluted into this 45-second of what did during the anthem, and nobody ever follows back up and says, well, okay, well, what did he do in his off time? And so, and that's why Michael, the impetus to write the article was, well, we know what Michael does in his off time. It's been there. It takes a little firing up of the Google machine to figure out exactly been done by Michael. I have the privilege of having a mutual friend with the Bradleys, which no way, sparked me to write this article. It's not a defense of Michael Bradley. It could have been Jonathan Osorio, the Altador. Could have been anybody, but we know what the Bradleys do. Their work in Toronto stands for itself. He's put his name out there long before there were fancy hashtags, long before slactivism became the key thing. And Jeff, I should have included this in the article, but I was thinking about it as even writing. When Colin Kaepernick did the kneeling, there was sacrifice that came with it, right? Right? And then the slogan, which stand for something, even if it means sacrificing everything, and that meant something. But if everybody can climb Mount Everest, and there's no joy for us, and there's no, if everybody, it's just become a slactivism. So long-winded answer to the question, anthems be done. Yeah, if you remove them, if not feel about them, I would want to make sure that it doesn't distract from the actual conversation that we need to have.
Yeah, and I think Tej really summed up a lot of my thoughts on the anthem as well, in terms of, you know, it's important, but it is worthy also to mention, and I think one of our viewers today mentioned it as well. Look, the whole reason the anthem is at sporting events to begin with was to propagate the Second World War, right? And to get people on the home front to buy into the war. After that, it just became what they're now, what sort of MLS is now, and other leagues are saying is now tradition, right? It's now tradition to play it. We're so used to it. You know, even people that I've spoken to who are TFC fans who also claim to be anti-racist, also then turn around and say, well, we might as well keep the anthem. We always put our scarves up. That's a tradition that we have built at the club. Why would you get rid of it? And to my answer to that is, you know, we're not like Liverpool. We're not 100 and something year old club, right? We're at best, 15 years old. So there's a lot of opportunities to build new traditions and to build new opportunities that don't include the national anthem, whether American or Canadian. Obviously, if you've read articles, you could, and look, if you just look into the words or the extended words of the American national anthem, you know, there are odes to slavery in it, right? Like the going to war to protect slavery. So in the Canadian national anthem, you know, look, I love this country. I'm born here. My parents were born in Jamaica and chose this place to live and become citizens, and, you know, chose this place to raise me. And I'm grateful to this country for that. But I'm also, you know, I also reserve the right to be critical of it. And I think being critical of it is the most patriotic thing you can do, because from there you can really affect change and making the country better. I believe in what this country can be, or what it purports to be. But we have to have these discussions, and we have to be open to, you know, looking at things like playing the anthem before a game and say, do we really need this? Does this really reflect the people that are coming to the games or watching on television? Does it enhance the experience? I say no. I also think, as Tej pointed out, like it ends up being a conversation piece that takes away from the opportunities to talk about real change, right? Instead, like you said, we end up on these talk pieces or think pieces about, you know, whether, you know, you're a patriot or whether, you know, not playing the anthem is disrespect to soldiers that come to our game. No, one, MLSE runs a military night for every single one of its properties. There can be discussion even around whether or not we need to have a military night, but that's another question. That's another conversation for another day. I think that, you know, the idea is that you can show respect for your country, love your nation, and not necessarily have to play the anthem at the start of a soccer game or hockey game or basketball game, right? I don't think that necessarily entails patriotism, because in a lot of the times when I'm around and I look around and I've been a capo, I've stood there in the capo box, looked around, and people mouthing the words, people looking at their phones, people like going to the bathroom and pulling a George Hill, if you understand that. Right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is the anthem really that important to you? Like, I would say no, right? And people who keep standing up for this anthem, I think is holding on to a straw man argument, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're hanging on to a straw man argument to say, like, look, this is tradition and this is showing patriotism to our country. You know, if I bring this into a Raptors context, you know, we play the national anthem. What, we have two guys on the Raptors roster that are Canadian, right? Like, and in the end of the day, you know, where is this sort of idea of patriotism? Why does it need to be in a sporting context like this? And this also goes to another point where, you know, throughout the history of football and other sports as well, but I'll take football because we all love football and we love the game and we talk about it all the time. It's been used as a political tool, right? To propagate bad governments, populist governments, fascist leaders. So why not remove that? If you're really about, I want politics out of my sports, great, get rid of the anthem. Like that, there you go, right? Like, that's a way to do it. You know, and I think from there, you really can start to talk about, okay, how does your club, whether it's Toronto FC, whether you support a CPL club, whether you're supporting a club in the US, how can your club now be a part of a community, and how can it impact real change within that community, right? Larry Tannenbaum who is the owner of MLSE for all intents and purposes, right, along with George Copeland and the Rogers family. Right, these are people who can make change, right? They're old white men who can make change, right? They have access to city politics, they have access to provincial politics, they have access to the federal government, right? Like if you can get the amount of money they got from governments to do renovations on the stadium, and if you can get all these sort of contritions out of the government for funding, then you can use, in that same tone, use that power to create change within Toronto, Southwestern Ontario, and conversely, potentially the rest of the country, right? And that's where I think the conversation needs to be. The anthem itself, as Tej mentioned, is sort of just a thread in the wind that people get really attracted to because it's kind of like instant reaction thing that you can put on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been dumbed down to almost fighting words. There's a lot of subtext in the arguments around the anthem right now.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we're fighting for.
Go ahead, Tesh.
Yeah, sir. I think the other thing to do is if you remove the anthem, Jeff, you remove the crutch that both people on both sides, quite frankly, have been relying on it. And getting back to that piece of Bradley is, if we remove the crutch, then fine. We've taken politics out of the sport. Now, let's remove all the symbol of it and the mates, and the camouflage uniforms, right? So there's a certain bit of, I don't want to say the odd, but I don't know if I can't have your cake and eat it too in this occasion of saying, I want my athletes to be, respectful of this, and this, but you can't have any of those symbols of patriotism, of which, as Mike said, the most, patriotic thing that you can do is to challenge and make your country raise its bar. And so if you remove the argument of the anthem, should we be standing or should we be kneeling, then we can start getting into the nitty-gritty details of what are sports organizations actually doing, what are athletes actually doing. We spent 2 weeks debating whether more than one player should have had their hand on Matt Duma's shoulder around the NHL. And not once did we ever get past that topic of going, there are 31 billionaires, including Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, that own hockey teams. What have they done other than put on one single banner that says "We skate for Black lives"? BS. Let's start getting into a deeper conversation about this. And the minute that the Band-Aid of the anthem is removed, I think we can begin to have those conversations.
Do you think sports can ever be apolitical? I mean, I'm just thinking about football as an extension to intercity warfare, as like in the old firm matches and stuff like that. I don't know if I can necessarily see sports at one point being entirely apolitical. No,
and nor do I want it to be, Jeff. And let me be clear: is that I don't think a match becomes a Democrat versus Republicans kind of event every time you go to a match. But this idea, I have this huge issue with people who go, well, I watch sports. Oh, I don't get into politics. Like, congratulations. So you don't get into your kids' education, your property taxes, your healthcare system. Like, what people can think politics is and how much it actually permeates our everyday lives are two different wholly subjects. So I don't think that the two can separate clearly, but at least eliminate some of these arguments about the symbolism of these things is what I would say.
Yeah.
Before we sorry, go ahead. No.
So go ahead, Mitchell. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say before we let you guys go, I did want to ask quickly your thoughts. I know you are an MLS-based group, but your thoughts on the Canadian Premier League's response, because they are in the unique position of being probably the only Canada-only league that's going on right now, and certainly this isn't just an American issue. We tend to kind of look down sometimes on south of the border, but systemic racism is in Canada, both in terms of when it comes to Black and Indigenous people as well. So I want to get your thoughts on what the Canadian Premier League and its players have been doing.
Yeah, I think it's been actually quite good. The first match, the fact that it dedicated, significant time on its virtual stadium. If you watch the virtual stadium feed, I know some people don't like it. I kind of actually like it, to Black Lives Matter, and to say that very clearly, I think is important. And obviously the players took a further step, though they didn't boycott their game. And for one, I completely understand why they wouldn't, or couldn't, really, in the end of the day. But the statements that they've been making have been pretty big, and obviously you have some players in the league, some visible players like Kwame Ua and Chris Nanko, and Kyle Porter, and Jean-Andrew Baptiste, and things like that, making pretty big statements. Pa Mutuka, obviously, out in Pacific, being the only Black head coach in the league. I think have made some really great statements. Again, just like we've sort of been talking over this last 20 or so minutes, what the challenge for the CPL and for its teams are going to be after leaving the bubble and the island games are done is, how do you now transition these great statements and these great visual moments into tangible action items, right? For one, think acknowledgement of a players' union is important, but that's the conversation for another day, right? Because there you then have player power and representation into the league, and that's how you end up with the NBA players making the moves they've made, and MLS and the WNBA. And eventually the NHL, Major League Baseball. But, but I think that, for the most part, the league has done a great job of that. And they know that that is an important topic. And especially, and I'll pull this into a slightly personal context, just in terms of, obviously I used to work for Forge FC, and, the sort of alleged incident at last year's Canadian championship game between Cavalry and Forge at Tim Hortons Field. And obviously there was a lot of back and forth on that. And I think one of the things that the CPL could take as a tangible action item out of this is like, okay, it took Canada Soccer a long time to say anything, to come up with a ruling, or to send us to an independent arbitrator to rule on this. I think more transparency on how these processes take place, and therefore you now have a base to say, okay, when a situation like this happens, or an alleged situation like this happens, we know what the steps are being taken. Because when you don't have transparency in those, that's when things get out of hand. That's when rumors start. That's when animosity builds over things like this. And I know the Forge FC players back Peter Reiners with this, and obviously the arbitrator came back and said that no incident had taken place. But I think that lack of transparency really hurt Canada Soccer in terms of its credibility on issues like this.
Well, Mike, Dr. Tej, we really appreciate your time, and I think I speak for all of us when we say appreciate the efforts of you guys and the TFC BIPOC fan coalition for making sure that BMO Field and Canadian soccer in general becomes more inclusive. So yeah, thanks for coming on and having this discussion.
Thank you guys so much for coming on.
Yeah,
thanks for having us.
We'll be in touch for sure. Thank you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Nope. What happened?
Bye, Tej.
Yeah. Thanks again to Mike and Dr. Tej for coming on and having that discussion. Obviously one that doesn't stop here in terms of both the discussion and the action that I think needs to take place to combat racism in our world and our sport. I think you mentioned slactivism a little bit, and as a white man, certainly sometimes you just want to move on, right? Like it seems like with the year we've had, you just want things to get back to normal, but there's people out there who, based on the color of their skin, can't do that. So I think until society changes, we've got to keep talking about this, keep taking action, and we all, have a role in demanding a more just and equitable society.
I mean, the one positive, I guess, out of this ridiculous 2020 is that change is coming whether we like it or not. We're remaking the world almost on a daily basis. So the opportunity to remake a better world has presented itself, and I'm pleased as punch that people are jumping and rising to the challenge, because whether we like it or not, tomorrow is not going to look like yesterday. So let's have tomorrow look even better than we could possibly imagine.
Well said, Jeff. Well said, Mitch. Credit to both of you guys. You guys did a great job today. And honestly speaking, that was just one of the just best conversations that I've had on any show that I've been able to do in my short career so far. So that was awesome. And again, thank you to Mike and Tej for coming on. And when I say like we'll be in touch, you guys know Wake in the Red. You guys know where we stand, and we'll hear more from that group through us for sure.
Absolutely, without question.
Yeah, certainly. And, as I said, soccer is a footnote on today's show, but I did want to bring up, just incredible accomplishment again by a Canadian player, and that's Kadeisha Buchanan, 4th straight Champions League in 4 years, the age of 24. I mean, as much as we celebrated Alphonso Davies last week, like this is obviously an incredible accomplishment, something that, is huge for the sport in this country, that, back-to-back weeks we had a man and then a woman lift the Champions League trophy in Europe. Like that's incredible.
Yeah, she's done it for a 4th time. She's 24 years old. What were you guys doing? Mitch, you just turned 25 the other day, didn't you?
Yeah.
Don't you have 4 Champions League by now? What's going on?
Europa League qualifiers, that's as good as I ever.
But serious shout out to, the Brampton's own Kadeisha Buchanan there. Making Fonzie's look like nothing, with her 4th. She's incredible, man. She's
really
incredible. I was at a little kind of get together the other weekend, and there was this little girl, and you know who her favorite player was? It was Kadeisha Buchanan. That was her role model looking up, and we're starting to see these names: Ashley Lawrence, again, Kadeisha Buchanan, Jordan Huitema, like all these big up and coming Canadian stars are going to be the next wave, not only like men's soccer, which you keep talking about, Fonzie, Jonathan David, but also women's soccer. And we are really living in like a glory age when it comes to Canada soccer in general.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, a lot of people for the last round of the Women's World Cup were talking about how, the Canada was a nation on the decline. I tend to disagree when you look at the success of our women's team players in club football. I think we're going to have a chip on our shoulder when they play meaningful competitive games again. And I think they're going to come out of the gates just screaming for victory.
They're itching for some redemption for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and barring the things stay relatively good, we'll see them this summer at the Summer Olympics. So a massive year, of course, for the Canadian women's national team as well as the men's. Let's move on to talking about tonight's game. Toronto FC. They can tie the MLS record for most consecutive regular season games. Obviously, there's going to be so many hilarious asterisks. When you look back at the Wikipedia article on this, I mean, it's like, okay, they won all these games in 2019. Then they won 3 games at the MLS's back tournament. Then they did this weird Canadian thing where they played all the Canadian teams. But, as many asterisks as you can put, I don't think it takes away from, an incredible amount of consistency and quality from this side. And yeah, I think we've seen clearly that they are definitely the best team in Canada over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and we're also going to add in Josie Alter and Io Akinula to that mix as well tonight. So look forward to that. And sorry, Jeff, you were going to say something?
Oh, nothing. I just wanted to bring up our stats from Martin that were locked.
Shout out Martin Bailey.
If TFC wins tonight, they only need 1 point from their final 2 games of the Canadian round-robin Infinite Cup to advance to the Voyageurs Cup final. Mitch, I know you have some tiebreaker shenanigans you want to bring up to sort of put a pal on my positivity there.
Well, I'm just, it's just hilarious that they don't have head-to-head as a tiebreaker for this. I mean, Toronto FC should be able to clinch tonight by, having beaten both Vancouver and Montreal twice each, but there's still a chance they could get caught on goal difference.
That's just personal opinion, Mitch. That's just personal opinion.
We have something from George here. It's another scroller. But I mean, what I take is just squeaking by doesn't seem like a recipe for success unless you're Portugal 2016 or Greece 2004. So George sort of answered his own question there. I mean, success is success, right?
Yeah.
I was going to say.
And, listen, a lot of teams talk about Vancouver, right? I mean, Mark Dos Santos on our sister show 2 weeks ago was saying the lack of consistency has hurt his team. TFC has had the same weird pathway, and yet we're still winning. So I mean, that's the end. I'm entirely positive about this, right? Like 1-0 wins win championships. You know, Portugal 2016, Greece 2004. They didn't play the most exciting attacking football, but it doesn't matter to the trophy in their case. So, you know.
I hear where George is coming from, but at the same time, we also have to think back. It's kind of tough at this point, but think back to those days back in March, April, May, when TFC were scraping together to get results at the beginning of the season. There are times almost every season where they drop points, you know. I don't think, I can't, in recent memory, can you guys think back last time, you know, 7-8 games in the season, TFC's first in the league? Like,
no, I remember 2017 being a lot more inconsistent than history has written about it. Like I remember there being a lot of 1-0 games and some concern. There was a slow start too, if memory serves.
Yeah, I don't think they won in their first 5. I think.
Yeah. So the fact that they are picking up points now and they're getting a head start, there is fair question and concern because we haven't played those teams like an LAFC or, you know, like an LA Galaxy, even I'll throw them in the mix. Like there are bigger challenges than Montreal and Vancouver, which is fair. But with that being said,
LAFC are a garbage fire right now.
What are we really knocking TFC for? We're knocking them for the way that they looked while picking up 3 points.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where I stand.
Yeah, that's a strange hill to die on. Absolutely. Like they're just not winning good enough for me. Right?
So, if there was ever a year to bank points too, I think this is the year where you want to have those points in pocket so that you don't have to worry about what permutations of MLS returns is back. You're gonna
and I just want to preface that too by saying, George, you're not alone at all in that sentiment. It's you and 99% of the United States, and you know half of Canada as well, who is thinking, you know, is this really legit? And we're gonna get that answer hopefully in phase 2 when that schedule drops, hopefully soon.
Yeah. I mean, it's not at all going to affect my enjoyment of getting back in the Champions League if we got it by playing Montreal and Vancouver and.
Hey, don't look past that Canadian Premier League team in the final, man.
Yeah, before we do finish up here, I did want to quickly give a shout out to Jonathan Osorio, 250 appearances for the club. You know, a player who has been just so important to everything Toronto FC's done. I mean, and had some big moments. You look at 2017 when, you know, he didn't necessarily play the whole year, but then was able to fight back and give some big performances in the playoffs. And now he's, you know, one of the first names on the team sheet. So, you know, in terms of Canadian players, domestically, even internationally, you know, this is a role model player that has kind of bucked the odds to be a consistent starter in MLS because there are not many Canadians consistently starting in MLS, unfortunately, and Oso is one of the main ones.
What do you? Oh, sorry, Mike.
I was going to say, Greg Vanny called him the epitome of Toronto FC and the epitome of the organization, which is probably the highest praise you can give somebody in Jonathan Osorio's case. We know as a local kid, you know, he's from Toronto and he loves Toronto FC through and through, and he's become now that role model for Canadian kids are looking up to kind of get to where he is. You know what I mean? He is what the average, you know, Canadian kid wants to become, and it's great to, you know, that he's also taken it all in stride. There were question marks about his you know, behavior, his work ethic, name it. There were question marks nonetheless with Jonathan Osorio, and as Mitch said, he overcame all of it, and it's great to see him make 250 appearances for the club. As Greg Vanny says, I personally hope that he can make 250 more because I'm all for it.
Yeah. I mean, I was just going to say, what is his secret weapon? Because for me, it's how comfortable he is under pressure. I think that's something that we miss when he's not on the side. He has absolutely no issue going up against a packed-in defense and looking for a pass and maybe slowing down the tempo of the game a little bit. Yeah,
I feel like he's done a really great job of finding his identity on the pitch. When he first came to Toronto FC, I feel like he was playing, or when he first broke through at TFC, he was playing a bunch of different positions. If I remember correctly, it was left mid, right mid. You got to throw him at center attacking mid, then you move it back to holding mid. But, you know, now he's found that identity as that true number 8 kind of central midfielder. You can throw him on the left wing if you want. But as Jeff said, it's his ability to control the game and settle the game. And I think we saw that when at the MLS's back tournament when he wasn't playing for TFC. And we were missing that sort of extra body beside Bradley, who's able to, drop in and receive a pass, look ahead, and spray a ball. So yeah, he's found his identity in the club. He's tough to play against on the other side of the ball. So yeah, all credit to Ozo there.
Yeah, for sure. On a team with so many technicians, having a player who rarely, if ever, loses the ball is so important, and who's still able to make the important passes you need to progress the ball forward. I think Osorio's, as you said, really found his role doing that. And I also want to give a shout out to Ashton Morgan, because that was the original Mr. Toronto
TFC,
FC, and a guy who kind of paved the way for people like Oso to be able to come in and have the careers they had. So big shout out to Ash for sure.
He's at RSL now, isn't he?
Yes,
oh,
he is.
baby.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah. Not a lot of playing time, unfortunately, for Ashton Morgan at RSL currently, but hopefully he breaks in, because he is, for me, still a quality MLS player. But I think we'll end the show there, guys. Michael, Jeff, thank you as always for joining me. Thank you everyone, of course, who watched and or will listen here, be it on Zoom, Facebook, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, of course, to Mike and Dr. Tej for coming on and, of course, having an important conversation. Make sure to go follow the Toronto FC BIPOC Fan Coalition on Twitter, and join us again, same place, same time, next Tuesday.
Cheers.